Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This week, the march to WrestleMania concludes as we take on WrestleMania 14. We said we were going to do WrestleMania 10. We'll get there next year, but we really wanted to do WrestleMania 14 for the 20-year anniversary.
This is the 20-year anniversary of the show that didn't create the Attitude Era. It had already started, but it kind of defined the Attitude Era. It kicked off Austin as the top guy. It's such an incredible example of big change while also being kind of a terrible show.
I don't know if I'd go as far to say terrible, but not a great show. But yeah, I would say the Attitude Era had started the year before around WrestleMania 13, but this is when they kick it into the stratosphere.
Yeah, like the difference between the previous year and this one is night and day. And this is where the ride finally kicks off into the stratosphere, and it just really never comes back after that.
Yeah. This show did about 500,000 more pay-per-view buys than WrestleMania 13 did.
That is outrageously insane. Like, in context, I think that has to be the biggest year-to-year jump in history, or at least
Uh,
at that time for sure.
yeah, I mean, the jump between WrestleMania 4 and 5 was really big too, but that was probably 350,000 or so.
And like that was like just because pay-per-view was more available, like the angle was hot, but it was also a lot easier to order from year to year. This is purely Steve Austin. That is the only thing that changes between 13 and 14.
Oh, they bring in Mike Tyson too. I think he deserves a lot of the credit.
Who's Mike Tyson? Come on, who did he ever be?
Yeah. Well, Mike Tyson, of course, had been suspended from boxing after he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off in their fight in the summer of 1997. He can't box. He needs money. And of course, there's professional wrestling is made for people like that.
And God, I mean, we talked a little bit before on another show. What was it, the Royal Rumble that we did?
Yeah.
Yeah, about how bringing Mike Tyson in and how they did it and how Vince McMahon was trying to basically own Mike Tyson and just be his promoter from this point on. But it can't be lost on people just how big a deal it was to have Mike Tyson here and how much mainstream exposure they were getting. In
Yes.
these days, in the 90s, ESPN was not covering WWE. Like they did a little bit for like the Lawrence Taylor thing, but not nearly as much as you would expect that they would for having actual athletes in a wrestling ring. This was everywhere, all over every channel, all the time. I vividly remember it from being a kid, and I wasn't even watching WWE at the time.
Yeah. They did a press conference in Times Square with Tyson and Austin and Michaels and Vince, and like every single media outlet in the country covered it. The Associated Press, the New York Times, Sports Illustrated, ESPN, Sporting News, CNN, everyone was there to see Mike Tyson because Mike Tyson at this point, even if it was for bad reasons, was a legitimate mainstream megastar.
Absolutely. And he had this sort of edge to him where you never really knew what he was going to do. And so it had to be thought of by people in those outlets. Like he might actually just be becoming a professional wrestler right now. We don't know. He can't box. Like you didn't know what he was going to do because let me just reiterate what you just said. He bit a man's ear off.
Yes. And ironically, we record this on the day where Conor McGregor has gotten himself into some very deep shit. And it strikes me that WWE may be in his future for similar reasons.
Conor McGregor would be the greatest heel WWE has had in this century, and it would be a miracle for them to get their hands on him.
It seems like the exact same situation as Tyson.
It really does. And there's so much money and stuff like that, like unpredictable, crazy people coming in. And especially if you have a star that you can put up against him, because it's not just that Tyson was Tyson. Tyson got their foot in the door. It's that Austin was the guy he was going at. So when people tuned in to see Tyson, they were like, oh, who's this badass who's going toe to toe with Tyson? They don't have anybody like that now for Conor McGregor to go up against, probably. But like that's the magic. It's not just Tyson, it's Tyson and Austin.
Yeah, it's the same situation as Mr. T bringing people to the first WrestleMania and then Hogan being able to keep them. And it's what failed at WrestleMania 11, where they were using Lawrence Taylor to draw people in. And first, it turned out that Lawrence Taylor was not really that big of an attraction. And also that Diesel was not a big enough attraction to keep people there.
Yeah. That's why Vince always goes to try to do these things. Is when it works, it is unquestionably the biggest one thing that you can do to turn around business. I mean, it absolutely is magic. It kind of worked again when they did it with Floyd Mayweather at 24, right? Like business picked up in a big way for that show.
It was that was a gigantic one-off though. They didn't have anything to keep people around at that point. They had a bunch of aging stars at that point. Shawn Michaels and Undertaker and Edge and Ric Flair and Triple H. They didn't have a new sensation that was going to keep all those people who bought that pay-per-view.
And that's the thing, is that those things kind of have to just come together. Like they didn't plan it so that Steve Austin would be crusting right when they finally got their hands on Mike Tyson, who was also the biggest heel in the world. It just comes together like magic.
Yeah, that stretch in the 20s where they had Trump at 23, and then they had Mayweather at 24, and then they were supposed to have Mickey Rourke for 25, and that fell through.
I mean, they had him, but all he did was throw one punch.
Yeah, he was supposed to wrestle Jericho, and he backed out of the match.
Oh, man, I can't wait till we get to that show.
Oh, my God. The backstory there is insane.
Yes, it is.
So back on topic, Mike Tyson. WCW could have had him, but Turner was not willing to associate themselves with Mike Tyson. One of those cases where standards and practices, really hurt WCW because, God, can you imagine Mike Tyson in the NWO?
God. Well, yeah, we can't associate ourselves with Mike Tyson, but Dennis Rodman, bring that guy right on in here.
Dennis Rodman never raped anybody.
True. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
In fact, I feel bad about even bringing it up because that's a good point.
And that's the irony that, like, Mike Tyson was convicted of rape and more or less welcomed back as soon as he got out of prison, but biting Evander Holyfield's ear off was too much.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Tyson with the NWO, that would have been unreal.
Yeah, Goldberg versus Tyson.
Oh my God, dude.
So Tyson grew up in New York. He was a big-time, old, Worldwide Wrestling Federation fan. When asked on Raw who his favorite wrestler was, he responded Bruno Sammartino, and you can almost see the anguish on McMahon's face.
You know that he wanted him to say somebody that he could put him in the ring with, and he had to list the one person who at that time was like blacklisted for life.
So this is where he wanted to be. I think he preferred the WWF to WCW just because even though WCW was bigger at the time, in his mind, because the WWF was what he had grown up with, that was the real big-time wrestling.
Absolutely. And you can see the joy on his face in every segment that he's a part of. Almost to the point where it completely undermines this badass persona he's trying to have. It's
actually very similar to Ronda Rousey right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like they're trying to be badasses, but they're just so happy to be there. It's a dream come true.
Yeah. So he had, as we previously covered, he was supposed to be the referee on that main event special in 1990 before WrestleMania 6, but he dropped out after he got knocked out by Buster Douglas. There was also some buzz about him maybe doing something with Hogan at the time, but it never materialized.
Man, and I know that we talked about that before too, so we're not going to get into endless speculation about what that could have been. But God damn it, Buster fucking Douglas, what you may have cost us.
Yeah, managed to ruin both boxing and wrestling simultaneously.
In one fell swoop.
So they get Tyson. They know they're doing something with him, but they don't figure out exactly what for a little while. They apparently even pitched Steve Austin on whether he would box Mike Tyson, which is the most insane thing I've ever heard.
God, I would have just loved to have been in the room where they're like, hey, Steve, what do you think about maybe boxing Mike Tyson live in the ring?
This is the company that did the Brawl for All a couple months after this.
But I mean, we're talking about Mike Tyson, a guy who literally graphically assaulted someone in a real boxing match.
Yes, and for real, one of the greatest boxers of all time.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Like a guy who concussed people into retirement easily.
Yeah, Steve Austin would not have lasted 30 seconds in a boxing match against Mike Tyson.
God, no.
Or any kind of real fight.
Man, even if you worked it, I wouldn't have trusted Mike Tyson not to accidentally knock him out.
Yeah. So the January 19th Raw, right after the Royal Rumble, is the famous confrontation. McMahon is out to announce Mike Tyson's role at WrestleMania. They're interrupted by Steve Austin. Austin shows no fear of Tyson and just he looks like he belongs in the ring with him. This is a star-making moment.
This is one of the best produced segments in wrestling history. It really is. Everything from corny Vince, who's actually somewhat acknowledging that he's the owner of the company in this segment, coming out and introducing Tyson, and Tyson just doing like the glad handing, hey, everybody. Austin coming out and getting immediately in his face and just seeing the turn in Tyson where he's just like, you shoved me? Fuck you. I'll kill you. Let's go. And yeah. I have no idea how real that was, but it feels real.
Yeah, there's the chaos. It just feels totally out of control. And they've got like 100 guys trying to keep them separate, and they're trying to get after each other. And McMahon yelling at Austin and JR on commentary. Just a perfect segment. Just a money. That's what sold WrestleMania. That one segment by itself.
And it literally ends with Vince McMahon screaming at Austin, "You ruined it! You ruined it!" Like, that's the crux of all of their booking for the next 2 years. This segment.
We are, setting up the Vince Austin. And this is the key, that they had something to keep people around with after WrestleMania, that Austin and Vince feud. They knew where they were going.
And, like, that's interesting, especially since there still, at this point, hadn't been a lot of acknowledgement that Vince was actually in charge. Like, Brett screwed Brett had already happened. It was a somewhat common knowledge, but he wasn't on screen doing that all the time. This is one of those few segments where he actually acknowledged that he's that guy.
Yeah, Vince is kind of barely on TV between Survivor Series and WrestleMania, just a few appearances.
And what would come?
Yeah. They spent a few weeks teasing Tyson and Austin. I don't know if they were, at this point, if they were still like actually considering having that happen, but I think they're also, buying time to see what Shawn's health status is. We'll get to that in a second, but he had very badly injured his back at the Royal Rumble and did not wrestle a single match between the Rumble and WrestleMania.
And, we covered that Royal Rumble, and you can see the moment in that match. He had already had back injuries. It wasn't just that one thing that did it. It was really just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. But it's bad, and he's hurting, and it's very much incredible that he is even able to work this match at all.
So the big twist on the way in is that Tyson joins DX. A couple weeks after the Austin segment, they do another segment where this time DX confronts Tyson, and Shawn rips off Tyson's shirt, and he's got a DX shirt on underneath. I guess this just builds drama for the main event. I don't think you could have just had Tyson kind of have issues with both guys, but I guess they wanted to stack the deck even more against Austin.
Yeah, I think the believable part of this feud was Tyson versus Austin, and they'd already built the heat on that, so people believed like Tyson hates Austin. So just by putting him in with DX, he didn't have to like work or anything. He can just be part of that group and all be antagonists for Austin.
Yeah. So sort of out of necessity, there's really there's almost no physicality between Austin and Michaels on the way into this. Obviously, Michaels doesn't wrestle in any matches. Austin only wrestles on TV like once or twice. They were also using him very judiciously. They have like 2 physical interactions, and both times it's Shawn sneaking up on Austin and nailing him with sweet chin music and knocking him out.
There was actually a time when sweet chin music was a super over finisher that actually put people out. I know that's hard to believe, because God knows all you see is super kicks in every walk of life, every day of your wrestling life now.
I think I super kicked 3 people today.
Yeah, I super kicked the cat every time I walk through the living room.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job just putting over in the bill, just putting over like sweet chin music anytime and the match is over.
Which is good because really, Shawn Michaels is not a credible threat to Steve Austin here. I mean, it's kind of a shame to say, but I can't think of the last time before this that Shawn had like a really good victory over somebody. Like he had eked out the win over The Undertaker because of Kane. And I mean, he's a chicken shit heel. That's obviously how that works, but they had to give you some reason to believe that Steve Austin wasn't just going to steamroll his way through because it was so obvious that that's what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I feel like I've spent this entire WrestleMania run arguing that the heel should have won. This is a time where, there was zero question Austin was going over.
Oh, God, it would have been such a disaster to do anything else.
Yeah. So Michaels, of course, injured his back at the Rumble. He took the backdrop into the casket, hit his back on the corner of the casket. He was initially fine, and then he woke up a couple days later and was in excruciating pain, couldn't get out of bed. He calls Vince to tell him what's wrong. Vince has a particular doctor he wants to go to, and the doctor tells him his career is over. So that one backfired.
I mean, do you know exactly what his injury was?
I think he herniated multiple discs.
Yeah. Like spinal injuries are obviously no joke. And it's one of those things where we all just genuinely accepted when we heard like, oh, Shawn's back is fucked, he'll never wrestle again, as, oh, I guess that's actually true. This just made it all the more shocking when he actually did come back. And it was like, wait, what? I thought like he couldn't even like lie down properly ever again.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. And I feel like it's always sort of glossed over in the telling of his career that it turned out he could wrestle and he was, pretty much fine. It took several years. I don't really know. I mean, as I've said, I've sort of speculated that I think he obviously had a really serious back injury, but I think the reason he didn't come back was he was dealing with his drug addiction and trying to get his family and personal life in order.
Right. Which, I mean, in the long run, I'm glad he did that, or he probably would be one of those wrestlers who's not alive to this day. So it's probably for the best.
So he was promoted as being in the 8-man tag match at No Way Out. Apparently, they were actually intending to have him in the match, but he, hurt his back working. He, hurt his back even worse working out that week. He was pulled from the match and replaced by Savio Vega in one of the most disappointing mystery replacements of all time. Made worse by the fact that they built it up throughout the show as to who the mystery man was going to be.
Even Savio Vega must have been like, hey, can you guys stop hyping this so much? Because they're going to boo me.
Spot to put the guy in.
Yes.
Apparently they thought about calling Sid, who would have been perfect.
Dude, that would have been awesome.
You knew we were going to work Sid in somehow.
Man, they should have called the Warlord.
It doesn't really seem like they were ever doubting that Shawn was going to be here, but they really should have. Between the back injury and the fact that this is Shawn Michaels you're asking to lose the world title at WrestleMania, and he doesn't have the best history in that regard.
Yeah, let's be clear. We've gone over this before, but Shawn Michaels has the most extended history of not actually doing jobs to give up titles of anyone who has ever lived in the business. Now, you might, like, whether you think that most of the reasons were legitimate or not, they're not. It's more than enough to be like, hey, maybe we should be worried about this.
I mean, what would they have done if he couldn't have wrestled?
Austin.
Triple H?
I mean, could they have done Triple H with Tyson still there and gotten something?
It would have been terrible, but like, isn't Michaels pretty much irrelevant in all this?
I mean, he is, but he's the one who has to wrestle the match. Yeah. Like, his name adds a little bit to this, and like it adds like a little bit of like the tradition to it. Like, Michaels is the old guard putting over Austin, like he's passing the torch. It's a weird situation that's passing the torch, but he's still the guy who has it, and he's giving it to Austin, right?
Yeah. And he is on a really hot run. Like, this heel run had really sparked their business.
Oh, God, yeah. Nobody gives...
My favorite Shawn Michaels is this kind of 6 months of DX.
And all of this talk about Steve Austin and about Bret Hart leaving and all of this stuff, people constantly leave out the fact that the Shawn Michaels Triple H DX was a draw. it was hot, man. Like, as a heel act, Shawn Michaels was on fire at this point. To the extent there, it sucks that he had to leave when he did, because there was so much more money in Michaels versus Austin down the line. There really was.
Absolutely. And just the amount of stuff you could have seen from him in the interim years, him and Triple H working together, more rounds of him against Taker, him against Kane, him against Shamrock, him against Rock.
Yeah.
He missed out on a lot.
Well, maybe not him versus Rock. I mean, it's not like they've wanted to actually wrestle each other,
Yeah,
but
done it. That's one of my favorite low-key real feuds in wrestling history.
and here's the thing, him versus Hunter, because that would have eventually had to have happened.
I think that's what they were probably going to end up going to.
Yeah. Which, I mean, gosh. Like, there was just so much potential. Like, literally, Michaels left right, like, he helped build this Attitude Era concept. And then right when it got hot, he couldn't be part of it anymore. He missed out on so much money.
Yeah. I mean, he ends up being a trooper and gutting this out. There is, of course, the amazing urban legend, I believe first told by Jim Cornette, that Undertaker, after his match against Kane, stayed at the gorilla position, taped up his fists, and as Shawn was going out, allegedly said something to him like, "You better do business tonight. I'm going to be here waiting for you."
That is a magnificent rumor. And I know that no parties involved would ever admit it if it was actually true. But in my heart of hearts, it has to be true. It's the greatest thing imaginable.
I mean, complicating factor being they do that entrance where the camera follows them as they're going to the ring. I guess they don't go all the way though, but like we don't see Taker hanging out there.
Right. And it may not have been at Gorilla. Maybe he goes back into the locker room and like walks by Michaels and says, "Hey," maybe it's something like that. It's probably just an urban legend that spreads like that. But God, I just love the idea of locker room Judge Taker being like, you're going to kill the business if you don't do this job. You're doing this fucking job.
Yeah. So kind of looming in the background is the Austin McMahon feud. On the Raw before WrestleMania, Kevin Kelly interviews Vince. He's asking him, "Do you want Austin to win the title? Do you want Austin as champion?" Vince keeps giving kind of corporate spin answers, and finally, when pushed, he gives an "Oh hell no."
God. And I can't wait till we get a chance to do more about Austin McMahon, because we've only kind of touched on it. We haven't covered any of like the major shows that has that on it. Like, we got to do like St. Valentine's Day Massacre at some point.
We'll get there.
Yeah, someday.
So as far as the what could have beens, I think the main event of this show would have been Bret Hart putting over Austin if Bret hadn't left the company. It seemed like they were keeping Vince or Austin and Bret apart so that Austin could finally beat Bret for the title at WrestleMania.
I mean, that would have been a really great moment. And it was clear that that's the moment that Bret wanted to give Steve. Like, their careers were kind of tied together as soon as Steve walked into the company. But it's not really questionable that what did happen is a much bigger deal than that would have been.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you could you can't really have Mike Tyson and Bret Hart team up.
It's oil and water, man. That doesn't work.
Mike Tyson turns his back on America and becomes a Canadian sympathizer.
I would love to see him even try to pronounce Canada.
There's a hilarious promo that Tyson does where he seemingly can't remember Shawn Michaels' name, so he just keeps calling him Heartbreak.
Heartbreak,
my man.
Heartbreak versus Cold Stone, the match of the century.
What was it about him? Why couldn't Mike Tyson remember anyone's name? Mike Tyson is not an unintelligent man.
And here's the thing, is he openly watched every week. He knew exactly who these people were. He just was unable to say their names.
Yeah. I mean, another what could have been, Foley wrote about in his book, he pitched Vince on doing like a best of 7 series of death matches against Terry Funk that would have culminated here at this show with some kind of exploding ring match filmed at the Double Cross Ranch. This sounds kind of cool, but Vince McMahon is not going to put Terry Funk in a major spot, and that's probably a little too brutal for this show while they're getting over mainstream to have an exploding ring match.
Yeah, I'm not a deathmatch guy in general anyway, so I would have generally just kind of hated this. The It's not so much the exploding ring match that makes me not like this so much as best of 7 series death matches, really? With Terry Funk? I don't know. This whole idea just sounds like it probably Vince gave it lip service, but I seriously doubt he even somewhat considered it.
We could do a show on like storylines Mick Foley pitched that he wrote about in his books.
And how much of a disaster they would have been had they actually made it to TV.
Yeah, a lot of them involve Melina.
God damn, Mick Foley was a creepy bastard for a while there.
It was.
Holy crap.
Low key. Okay, so it's showtime, March 29th, 1998, Sunday evening, the Fleet Center in Boston, Massachusetts. Sold out with 19,028 fans in attendance, 15,581 paid for a $1 million gate and $273,000 in merchandise sales.
Get it.
Yeah. Buy rate of 2.3 for 730,000 buys, just shy of the WrestleMania 5 record, which is, again, to reflect on how crazy huge WrestleMania 5 was.
Yeah. I mean, we always think about the Attitude Era as being like the spike that was way bigger than anything else. Just remember to think back to when it was super hard to get pay-per-view and it still did a 5.
Yeah, WrestleMania 5, I don't remember the buy rate, but it must have been like an 8 or something like that.
Jesus.
On commentary, the classic team of Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler thought they were really strong tonight.
Yeah, this is when you have them just completely at their best. This is this before the Bell's palsy incident that's going to lead to JR turning heel?
Yes, that happens at the end of 98.
Yeah, so this is still JR completely at his best. He'll obviously go through some trials and tribulations over the next year, and then we'll kind of get him back at his best in 2000. But like these guys are completely on top of their game. King is witty.
King is still
and
good at this point. Yeah,
King's still
King is actually funny.
Yeah, you can tell the second King went off is when he started wearing T-shirts instead of a polyester jacket.
Yeah. I feel like he lost part of his soul with that whole deal with the cat and just never came back from it.
I agree. Like, because he's clearly putting in like prep time for this. He has like one-liners set up for everything across the entire show. Like he looks like a person who's prepared and giving his best performance.
We get kind of a strange video package.
Yeah.
The narrator says, "The first temptation is to say that tradition has abandoned WrestleMania, but tradition is indeed alive and well, because indeed, despite the brash bravado, it is the WWF Championship gold that has brought these men to WrestleMania." And they proceed to show clips of Hogan, Andre, Bruno, Big Cat Ernie Ladd, Gorilla Monsoon, Vince McMahon Sr. It's a very nostalgic package.
And then at the end of it is a curious line that I couldn't figure out, where it's just like, it fades to black and it's just like, and behind everything, we know that the father of it all is watching. And I'm like,
McMahon Sr.
But they put it in such a weird way that I'm like, do they mean junior or senior? Because if they mean junior, that's so narcissistic.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a package just kind of dripping in nostalgia.
But like, this is a time where you've got to remember, WrestleMania was garbage for several years before this. It had gotten to the point where it almost wasn't even a thing anymore. Like it had gotten almost to like the point where like WCW was with Starrcade, where it was just another show. There were, I think the previous year, like WrestleMania had been outdrawn by other pay-per-views in the same year, right?
Yeah, other like Survivor Series did a bigger buy rate. I mean, SummerSlam may have too. Yeah, it was not even their biggest pay-per-view of the year at that point. The other thing is the year before, like WrestleMania was in Chicago with the Rosemont Horizon, 15,000 people or whatever in attendance. They had done the Royal Rumble at the Alamo Dome and had 60,000 people there.
Yeah. Like
It just seemed like a small time show.
WrestleMania was just in danger of slipping through the cracks. Like, not entirely, but for them to be pumping all of this, like the traditions of WrestleMania and blah, 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 like that didn't really exist here. Because at this point, all it had been is like the Glory Hogan years and then just like a bunch of years of crappy, crappy, crappy WrestleManias. It's easy to forget that because from here on, like it's all interesting WrestleManias with big stars. But just remember that at this point, there hadn't been a good one since, I mean, I would say since like six.
Was the last home run, I'd say. Yeah,
Yeah.
each one after that has an asterisk by it.
There have been more shitty ones than good ones at this point.
Yeah, they cut the DX band's horrific rendition of America the Beautiful. Have you ever heard this?
Yes. Oh my God.
Oh
The
my
DX
God.
band sucks. God.
They really do. This is like, I don't know how anybody, like this was highly disrespectful to the United States of America.
Let's say there's like riffing on America the Beautiful, and then there's just like, hey guys, let's make a rock song and just say America a bunch of times in it.
Oh, tradition had truly abandoned WrestleMania at this point.
Like you got to know that like Vince hated this
How did that get approved? I'm shocked by that.
because it's very clear that what Vince wants is like some soulful
Yeah,
Motown stuff. Like they'll go back to like Boys to Men the next year.
that's really good.
Yeah, it's great. Like that's what Vince wants from this. He wants like a soul singer to do America the Beautiful. Whoever talked him into this probably got fired.
Yeah. So we have kind of a mix of eras. They've gone to the more modern ring setup, black ring posts, black steps, red ropes, black guardrail, black mats on the floor. They have the scratch Attitude Era logo on the screen, but on the turnbuckles, they still have the old WWF logo, and they still have like the kind of sunny, upbeat WrestleMania theme song from the last few WrestleManias. So they haven't gone quite all the way with the Attitude Era presentation compared to where they'd be a year from this.
And let me also say that, like, in terms of presentation here, in terms of like the set and the ropes and the lighting, this show looks like shit compared to other WrestleManias. Like, we even, like, I started watching 10 because I thought that we were going to be doing it. And, like, it looks amazing compared to this. Like, this, it just looks dark and dreary and small.
It's a weird entrance. It's just like this, circular entrance with lights that they would use for most of their pay-per-views around this time. But the ramp is curved.
Yeah.
So they come out through the entrance and then they have to make like a 90-degree left turn to get to the ring. It's
really
just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because they had to have the band set up because the DX band performed a few times throughout the night.
That might be it. Of course, this isn't as bad as the following year. Well, they were literally just put a giant metal obstruction in the way that everyone bangs their head on the way in.
Just a big metal 15.
Yeah, just like huge and blocking the entire entrance.
It's strange to see WrestleMania without a gigantic set and not being in a dome. It just doesn't feel right.
Like, I don't know if it's just because Kevin Dunn doesn't really have the control that he would have later, or maybe just his vision for the product hasn't really begun yet. And maybe it's just that they don't have the money yet. Like, it hasn't come in all the way. But like WrestleMania, this does not look like a WrestleMania. It just doesn't.
Well, no, I mean, they don't have the budget to do a gigantic production. They're still cutting costs.
Yeah, maybe that's because they just paid somebody on this show $3 million to be on it.
Yeah. Because they did so many buys, they turned a profit. But as Vince said, I'd rather lose money doing 500,000 buys than make money doing 250,000.
That's true. And I very much respect that because that's the WWE way. And that's why a lot of the times you don't even notice when they're failing because they go big anyway.
So the opening match is a 15-team, 30-man tag team battle royal. This is one of the greatest clusterfucks I've ever seen.
Let's go through the rules just very quickly Because the idea is that there's 30 men in there, but they're 15 teams. So when one of the people gets eliminated, the other person has to just leave, which is
Just
really stupid.
that just sulked the back.
So like literally that's
Okay.
what happens is somebody gets eliminated and his partner's like, "Oh man," and then just wanders off.
There are a few times where they don't realize that their partner was eliminated for a while until one of the referees gets their attention.
And that's even better because multiple times somebody gets eliminated and then like 5 minutes later you're like, "Hey, why is that guy still in there?"
How many of the teams that were in this match can you name
Oh
without
my.
looking?
All right, let me close my eyes. Uh we got the Skull and 8 Ball there.
Yeah.
We got LOD 2000.
Yep.
We oh crap. We got the New Midnight Express,
Who's in the new Midnight Express?
Bodacious Bart, and I don't know who the other one is.
Bob Holly, Bombastic Bob, or
Bombastic
Bodacious
Bob.
Bob. I don't know.
Jesus Christ. I know
You
like
know
the
who was considered for those spots?
who?
Edge and Val Venus.
Edge,
Awesome Adam and Sensuous Sean.
Awesome Adam, and Sensuous Son. Would that have worked?
No. No. No new anything can ever get over.
Come on, man. Sensuous Sean.
I think that would have killed Edge's career before it began.
I think you're right. I think it would have segued perfectly into Val Venus, though.
Yeah. Who else is in this match?
Oh Christ! I mean, I know the Rock and Roll Express are in there with their old
That's
asses.
so weird.
They're
The other thing that's amazing is they're not even that old. They're in like their late 30s or early 40s, but they look like they're 100.
and that's the thing. Like these days, like we have people in like AJ Styles who's like 42, but he looks like he's 29.
Yeah. Like AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura are both 40-ish, and you wouldn't think it.
But now these days they actually stay in shape. Back in the day when you were smoking and drinking yourself to death after the show, you aged quickly.
Okay, I'm going to read who's in this match.
Please,
You've
please.
got two Los Boricuas teams because one wasn't enough. You've got
Two?
Savio Vega and Miguel Perez and Jose Estrada and Jesus Castillo.
Okay.
You've got the Truth Commission of Recon and Sniper, one of whom is Bull Buchanan.
I have a question about them once the match gets started. We'll get to that.
You've got Bradshaw and Chains teaming up for no reason.
Yeah, what the fuck was that about? That didn't even make sense.
Just
Bradshaw
just getting guys on the card, throwing guys together.
had Bradshaw and Wyndham like broken up recently?
Yes.
Okay.
Wyndham turned on Bradshaw and joined the NWA Invasion, which we get to talk about in a second.
Oh boy.
You've got two Nation of Domination teams. You've got Farouk and Kama and Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. You've got the Quebecers employed for some reason.
Yep.
You've got the Rock and Roll Express, the Headbangers, Too Much, Disciples of Apocalypse, 8 Ball and Skull, the Harris Twins, Steve Blackman and Flash Funk.
What a tag team.
A black man and a black dude, I guess, was what they were going for there.
That's amazing.
The Godwins, the New Midnight Express, and the Legion of Doom, repackaged as LOD 2000 and managed by Sonny. What do you think of LOD 2000?
I kind of like the new look, honestly. Sonny doesn't work with them at all, though
That
the
gets
outfit
dropped pretty quickly. She looked really hot.
I'd say the
though.
outfit that she's wearing works with me for sure. That's the most memorable part of this whole show for me is Sonny's outfit. But like they look great, and like the pop that they get is incredible.
Yeah. So they'd hit hard times. They had lost a bunch of matches. They lost the tag belts to the Outlaws. They couldn't win them back in rematches, and then it just blew up. They fought each other. They split up. They had been gone from TV for a few weeks. So this was a big surprise to see them back together.
Now, calling them LOD 2000 is obviously going to date that tag team horribly. So now it just sounds so goofy, like, hey, look, it's the Rock and Roll Express 1980.
So I'm just going to cover the run-ins in this match because there were a ton of them. Who books a battle royal with a bunch of interference? Vince
Like literally,
Russo.
I think the first 3 eliminations were all because of people who weren't in the match.
Yes. Kurgan shows up to attack his former Truth Commission stablemates, Sniper and Recon.
Sure.
Last pay-per-view appearance I remember from Kurgan.
Yeah.
Um, guy was so big. Wrong era.
Also, he just was very awkward.
Yeah.
Like some people are just super gawky and awkward no matter what you try to do with them.
Um, Barry Windham interferes on behalf of the NWA stable to further his feud with his former tag team partner Bradshaw. Let's diverge and talk about the NWA invasion.
Okay.
This is depending on who you believe, whether you believe Vince Russo or Jim Cornette. Either Cornette's terrible idea or a Russo idea designed to bury Cornette. Which do you believe?
I mean, they're both people who are massively full of shit in so many ways, but it's so much more likely that this was something that Cornette pushed for, isn't it?
It's not that bad of an idea. Like, the idea of just giving Cornette like a stable of classic wrestlers and having them be mid-card heels is a pretty good one.
Right.
But they do this stupid thing to involve the NWA in it when no one gives a shit about the NWA in 1998.
God, the NWA, like literally 2 years before, Shane Douglas had wiped his ass with the NWA and it was over.
Yeah. So they have like all these they've got the NWA North American title held by Jeff Jarrett. They've got the NWA World Tag Team titles, but they don't get Dan Severn for another couple months, even though he's the NWA champion. And I think by the time he shows up, he's not the champion anymore.
I think that that's probably true. I think it is.
I think the belt's just being defended in Japan at this point.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, Cornette does his best to try to put this over. You've also got the Rock and Roll Express as heels, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
And here's the thing, like they just didn't have the talent to make this work. Like I don't just bringing in a bunch of outside talent and calling them the NWA because they had been NWA guys. Let's remember Ric fucking Flair had trouble getting WWE fans to know who he was when he came in because there's just not a guaranteed crossover, especially in that era. I guarantee you that there were a ton of WWE fans who had no idea who the Rock and Roll Express were. And if you don't know who they are already, they're just two old dudes who don't know how to be heels.
Yeah, who look straight out of the 1980s.
Yes.
Because they are.
And like there were probably some people who were on the roster who would have made good representatives of the NWA. Bradshaw's probably one of them.
Yeah, well, they put so Jarrett, sure, that seems fine.
Right.
Wyndham, okay, I guess. I mean, Barry Windham was not doing so great in 1998.
Right.
I don't know. You give him a tag team too. Like, just don't have the NWA part of it. That does not get over at all.
Just give Jim Cornette a stable of guys. There's so many guys just floating around at this point. Just give him 4 dudes, whoever they are. Have Jeff Jarrett be the leader.
Yeah. So this storyline totally bombs. Like, they've pretty much dropped it by this point because Jarrett has split with Cornette and they've moved on from Cornette managing the Rock and Roll Express to Cornette having the new Midnight Express of Bart Gunn and Bob Holly.
And this is such a self-burial because Bart and Bob look fucking stupid. Like, they look like jobbers from the 80s.
They are jobbers.
And, like, that's the thing, is that Bob Holly had literally been a jobber for, like, 10 years. And he looks exactly the same.
Yeah. The new Midnight Express sucked. They're around for a couple months. And then they end up fighting each other in the Brawl for All. Bob Holly was the only guy Bart Gunn couldn't knock out.
And thank goodness for Bob Holly. Like he'll go on to like have a second wind as legitimate badass Bob Holly. Good for him. It's gonna take a lot of bumps for him to get there.
So what else happens in this match? D'Lo gets eliminated, but Mark Henry either forgets the rules or doesn't realize it because he continues to wrestle for several more minutes.
I think that he does a spot with Brian Christopher where he like throws Brian Christopher up in the air, and it's like the only thing that gets a reaction in the whole match. And I think they planned that spot out. So even when D'Lo went out, Mark Henry was like, "I haven't done my spot yet. I'm just gonna stay in until I can do it."
DOA get eliminated, but they come back in to eliminate the Godwins. It comes down to LOD and the New Midnight Express. The Godwins hit LOD with their slop buckets. LOD make their comeback. They clothesline out both Midnight Express guys to win. Right team went over. This was a really stupid match, but I still kind of enjoyed it just for the randomness of seeing all these people.
I mostly enjoyed it for two great Jim Ross moments. The first one was when he notices that Mark Henry is still in the match, and he just buries Mark. Just by being like, "Oh, I guess Mark Henry didn't get the instructions before the match started."
Yeah.
Which is just great. And then when he has to, with a completely straight face, say, "Oh, the Godwins are attacking LOD," really bringing back that storied LOD Godwins rivalry.
We all remember that, don't we?
Well, absolutely. It was storied. I mean,
who can ever forget?
Hall of Fame.
The Godwins are going to go into the Hall of Fame at some point.
Shut your mouth. I don't want that.
Hillbilly Jim can induct them.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We get a recap of the DX public workout in Boston. What is a public workout?
I mean, they used to do that with boxers.
It's just a WWE thing, it seems.
I mean, they used to do that with boxers back in the day where, like, Ali would just do his workout for the day, jumping rope and stuff in front of a bunch of people. It's not really a thing, especially not in 1998.
Yeah, so it's like an old-timey thing that wrestling is still doing into the 90s. They did one of these with Lawrence Taylor, too.
Oh, yeah. It's just to be like, hey, look at him getting ready. Like, okay, you could have just done a promo video for that, but sure.
They had a big crowd. It looked like 10, 15,000 people.
I mean, to some extent, like you put something in Times Square back in those days and people were going to show up to it regardless.
Yeah. So Austin came to beat up DX, but they end up tying him in the ropes, and then them and Tyson kiss his bald head.
Like I could literally feel like heat drifting away, like disseminating into the air as they're like kissing his forehead, and Austin's like, no.
Really surprised Austin went along with that.
Me too.
Because he was not shy about saying no to things. Like, why not just have Michaels knock him out with chin music again?
Why not just separate him? Like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. Go away.
That would work too.
Yeah.
They show some other stuff. Sable signing autographs at the hotel, some VIP dinner with the wrestlers, not the gigantic production that WrestleMania weekend will later become.
It's actually fascinating to see because like this is kind of an indie show staple of like after the show, you go out to a restaurant and the wrestlers are there eating and you can come up and talk to them while they're eating, just like whatever. It's fascinating to think of a time when WWE did that. And like you could just like go out to dinner and then just go bother Sable while she's eating pasta. Like that's crazy.
Next, for the light heavyweight title, we've got Taka Michinoku defending against Aguila. Aguila is the man who would later become Essa Rios. He's like 19 or 20 years old here and under a mask. He does not get an entrance.
Now this match, we don't talk a lot about Dave Meltzer on this show. We probably could. I mean, I've never even really asked you your opinion about Dave Meltzer and his work. But this match gave him such wood. I think he still has it 20 years later.
Thanks, Bruce. This is a messy, entertaining train wreck of a match, I thought.
Yeah.
How many moonsaults are there in this match?
There are at least 5.
This is a 6-minute match. There's a moonsault every like 1.1 minutes in this match.
And I mean, it does feel longer, and they've considering that these are two people with completely different styles. And I mean, this is before like Michinoku had some experience working kind of like a hybrid Mexican Japanese style, but this is before that was really like a widespread thing in Japan. And like they don't speak the same language. They're both just the only lightweights the WWE could get. And they put together a pretty good match here.
Yeah. A minute into the match, Aguila hits a moonsault off the top rope to the floor, and it's just gorgeous. He hits it perfect.
Yeah. And like the crowd pops. And it's like all of a sudden, because when they come out, the crowd are actively like scratching their balls. They do not care about this.
It's the light heavyweight title. There's no
Right.
reason to care. JR and King spend this match arguing about whether Brian Christopher is actually the best light heavyweight.
Is it weird that this is like the one show in WWE history where Lawler seems determined to get his son over?
They always did this. Well, he had been managing him, and they did this fun bit where JR would subtly allude to the fact that King was his son, and King would get angry about it.
Yep.
Like, oh, you can't blame Brian Christopher. He got a bad break at birth. So Taka comes back with a springboard plancha. Aguila comes back with a corkscrew plancha. They're doing nothing between the spots here. Like, they kind of stand around and look at each other for about 10 seconds, and then somebody hits another moonsault.
This is one of those matches that I guarantee you was worked out entirely in the back with like translators and people helping them. Because literally they're just like, spot, are we good? Okay, spot. All right, okay, we good? Let's do another one.
So how did you have to translate here? I mean, I guess Taka speaks English. So Taka would speak English, just English to Spanish, I guess.
And I mean, there's sort of like a hybrid wrestling language that everybody understands. I mean, when people say that there's like a language barrier, that's true. But in wrestling, it's less pronounced. Like there's everybody learns the same spots, everyone learns the same moves. Most of the moves have English names or are called by the same thing, regardless of where you're wrestling anyway. It's not impossible to put a match together. But it's hard to put together an intricately choreographed one without having a go-between.
Taka misses a corkscrew moonsault. Aguila connects with the top rope moonsault. Taka goes for a splash, but Aguila gets his knees up. I just love how they're trading the advantage with seemingly nothing having happened in between.
Yep.
Taka or Aguila hits a Frankensteiner from the top rope, one of those where he springboards off the middle rope. That was pretty amazing.
God.
This guy was a incredible athlete.
Absolutely.
I
He's
don't
still
really know
working.
what ended up happening. Yeah, he's still around. He's only like 40 now.
Yeah, he went to Mexico and he wrestled as Mr. Aguila down there for years and years.
Great name.
Yeah.
There's a missile drop kick from Taka. Aguila slips out of the Michinoku driver. He goes for a Hurricane Rana, but gets power bombed. Taka misses a moonsault. Aguila comes off the top rope, but gets hit with a drop kick. And then Taka scores with the Michinoku driver for the pin. 6 minutes, like zero selling or psychology, but I was entertained.
It really struck me watching it how much of like a precursor to that X Division style this is. Because really it's just, all right, here's our spots. Let's go out there and do them. And the crowd is interested. Like it must be said. The crowd generally didn't care about the light heavyweight division at all, but they seem to really enjoy Taka here.
I may just not be remembering it, but it seems like there was never another light heavyweight match like this again after this.
Not that got this kind of spotlight, no. Like
Yeah.
all the lightweight matches I remember after this were on like Heat.
And like where guys just went out and went balls out. It felt like after this they slowed him down and just made him work like heavyweights, which is kind of something that plagues them to this day.
I don't believe that Vince McMahon sees anything in cruiserweight wrestling at all. I don't think he sees the point. I don't think he sees a draw in it. It doesn't matter to him.
Yet they keep going back to it.
Because people keep asking for it, even though he doesn't know why.
Next, we get a very weird and historically important segment where Jennifer Flowers, who is famous for having had an affair with Bill Clinton before he was president, interviews The Rock. And she asks him questions like he's running for president. Like, she asks him about the homeless situation, and he says he doesn't really care about the homeless people as long as they keep their cardboard boxes off The Rock's lawn.
Or, yeah, you ask about, like, what would you do about the judicial system? Which is a very weird and vague question if you're asking a presidential candidate. Like, what would you do about the judicial system?
No, that's just to set up Rock calling himself a hung jury.
And is this, I see in your notes that this is the first use of him saying, if you smell what I'm cooking. Is it really?
Yep. At least as far as I remember.
No shit.
Yeah. So that's what came out of this. Asked about how he would run the White House, he says, we need to make sure the interns don't do anything orally wrong, and then corrects himself to say morally wrong.
Now, two things about this. The first one is, this is incredibly charming. Like, Rock's charisma
He's
is
on fire here.
He is killing it. And the second thing is, it's entirely possible that The Rock is going to actually run for president.
Yep, I was going to get to that.
And I hope they play this if he does.
He's not saying no. He's definitely thinking about it.
I mean, he could win, right?
Yeah,
he
anything's
could totally
possible.
win.
In this post-Trump world, I rule nothing out.
He's the most likable man in the world.
Doesn't he sort of cross all boundaries too? Does anyone not like The Rock?
He doesn't even have my politics, and I'd have to struggle not to vote for him.
Next up, we've got the DX band performing Triple H's entrance music because he defends the European Championship against Owen Hart. So he's back to being the European champion. He won the title back from Owen after challenging him to an impromptu match. Owen had injured his ankle the week before in a match. So they wrestle this quick match. Triple H gets him in an ankle lock, and the referee stops the match to protect Owen's health, setting up this rematch in which Chyna will be handcuffed to Commissioner Sergeant Slaughter to prevent her from interfering.
I mean, that seems kind of like illegal, right? To like force a woman to be handcuffed to you.
The month after this, they force her into a cage, so it would only get worse.
Good stuff. Before we get started with the match, I just want to take a quick moment to point out Triple H has a major problem throughout the entire Attitude Era, and that problem is that he doesn't know how to dress himself. I get the distinct feeling that he doesn't understand what his character is because it's evolving so quickly from Hunter Hearst Helmsley to the game Triple H. And like it's such an awkward growth period in between where he's still wearing like a big fancy Ric Flair robe here, but like with like sort of like weird tights underneath. Like it's ugly.
Yeah, so he's still wearing like the Hunter Hearst Helmsley like kind of pants, but they're tights, but they're kind of loose tights, and he has a belt. But now they've got like, green DX logos stitched into the legs. It's a very strange getup.
Yeah, and that's kind of the look he would stay with for a while, and he keep trying it with the robes and stuff, and it just looks like shit. Like where everybody else in DX would look like cool and interesting, and they're wearing like casual clothes, he always looked like a guy who was trying so fucking hard to figure out how to look cool, and he just couldn't do it.
And then when he finally just switched to trunks, it was like, that's it. Now he's going to be a main eventer.
Bam. Overnight. Genius. And then he started investing in denim, and like it all came together.
Those leather caps. Yeah.
I think he just stole the leather cap from the guy in the DX band and just wore that.
Wasn't Jim Johnson the bassist here?
Oh, God, I didn't even realize, was he?
Well, he's either on the bass or the guitar. Yeah, he looks very out of place in his, like, white dad sneakers. So they have a pretty good match. Owen hits a Hurricane Rana. Owen double legs Triple H, but Triple H blocks the sharpshooter. Triple H hits the high knee, works on Owen's ankle. Owen manages to crotch Triple H. He gets a missile drop kick and a power slam, both for 2 counts. A spinning heel kick from Owen. Owen goes for another Hurricane Rana, but Triple H blocks it with a power bomb. Owen comes back with a crossbody from the top rope. This is where I noticed the crowd was really not feeling this match.
Not at all.
They end up turning Owen heel not long after this. It just feels like they completely didn't seize the opportunity at all on his face run.
I think Owen always had trouble like when he got older because he couldn't do like the high flying stuff as much anymore. And like he's just not a great babyface at this time in his career. Like it just doesn't fit.
No, Owen Hart is a natural heel.
Yeah.
As a young guy, I think he could have been like, high energy, high flying babyface, but he was always best as a shithead heel. He's like Christian in that way.
Some people you can tell are just prankster dickheads in real life, and they come across that way.
Triple H goes for the pedigree. Owen reverses and goes for the sharpshooter. He still can't lock it in. Triple H kicks Owen back into the corner. Owen hits the corner and then falls down and it headbutts Triple H in the junk. I loved this.
That is Triple H's favorite spot in the world. The only spot he loves more than that is like the slingshot toss into the corner.
There's another pedigree attempt. Owen backdrops it. Helmsley holds on through the backdrop and goes for a sunset flip, but Owen blocks it and locks in the sharpshooter. Chyna is able to help Triple H get to the ropes. She then throws an absolutely massive amount of powder into Sergeant Slaughter's eyes to blind him.
To the point where, like, I think she also blinded, like, the first 3 rows.
For the rest of the show, there's this powder on the floor right there, and people keep slipping on it.
Oh, man.
I'm pretty sure Austin almost blew his knee out on it in the main event.
Oh, he must have been hot about that when he got back.
Yeah. Pedigree from Triple H gets the win. I thought this might have been the best match of the night.
I mean, it was a good match. I mean, it was pretty much heatless, like you said. Triple H, surprisingly, despite the fact that Shawn Michaels had liquid heat at this point, Triple H really doesn't have any. Like, it just doesn't carry over to his singles matches at all.
Yeah, I think he only works at this point when it's him, is Helmsley's bodyguard, is Triple H, is Shawn Michaels' bodyguard.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, it's a really good match, though. I mean, they're doing some interesting stuff. Owen's on top of his game. This is probably like the really last really good singles match Owen has.
Yeah, not a lot of jumps. I mean, after this, he's mostly in tag teams.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got a mixed tag match in which Mark Miro and Sable team up against Goldust and Luna. The storyline here is Miro has gotten jealous that Sable gets more attention than he does, so he teamed up with Goldust, who is the king of attention, but that didn't work out, and that led to Sable and Luna getting into it, which is the real heat in the feud here, is the fans want to see Sable and Luna fight.
The fans just want to see Sable to the extent that the pop she gets is outrageous.
Yeah. She is on par with Austin here. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but she might have actually been hotter in front of this audience.
That's the simple truth, man. Like, people are so unbelievably excited to see her. And like, I know that these are the kind of things that people like don't take seriously or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that her Playboy is still the best-selling Playboy of all time, right?
Probably. It felt like they claimed that every time a WWE woman was in Playboy.
And I'm pretty sure it can't possibly actually be true that like Candice Michelle broke the record.
That seems unlikely.
But like at this point, I believe it's probably actually true. Because like she was just such a huge deal, man.
She's so hot for a couple months here, and then fades so rapidly, and is out of the company about a year after this.
Yeah, they just had no idea what to do with her.
This is a very odd era for Goldust. What is he wearing here? Like a silver bodysuit with lingerie on the outside.
Look, I understand that what he's trying to do is trying to push the envelope even further. Like, is this the around the time where he was like, "Yeah, let me get breast implants or something"?
Yes.
And it's like he's trying to push the controversy envelope because just like the gay innuendo isn't edgy enough anymore. You know what I mean? Like that was good enough for like 96. But here we are in 98 and society's changing and like you've got to do more to get to that point. And it's getting weird. Like he's clearly lost control of what this character is and he's like in terrible shape.
He's
He just looks
so
miserable.
bad.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah, so they had done all sorts of weird things with him on the way into this. He came out dressed as Sable one time. He came out in blackface one time.
Yep.
He came out dressed as Dusty Rhodes, being called Stardust one time.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Just what dumb, weird thing can we do with Goldust this week is the question on everyone's mind.
And I mean, he must have been able to tell that like his time was kind of coming to an end here.
Yeah. He will shortly after this be repackaged as born again Christian Dustin Rhodes, which really sucked.
It is fascinating though that of everybody on this show, there are only 3 people who are still with the company, and he's one of them.
Yep. Somehow he's still wrestling after all he's been through.
Crazy.
I mean, he's not that old because he started so young. He was probably 19 in 1991.
Yeah.
So he's
in his 40s.
Yeah, he's older, but not that old.
But he's probably better now than he was at this point.
He's in much better shape now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sable is green, but looks pretty good, I thought. I mean, there's a thing or two that doesn't go right, but she's clearly catching on pretty fast.
And here's the thing about being critical about Sable. This was an era much before developmental things. They didn't even have like the warehouse that they used to take people to teach them how to wrestle. Like she was probably getting like an hour of wrestling before the show, some shows. She's not wrestling dark matches or anything. So like her only matches are like high profile pay-per-view matches. For her to actually be doing pretty decent is pretty incredible.
Yeah, you compare to like the preparation Ronda Rousey has surely had for her match, where I would assume she's been at the Performance Center 3-4 times a week for the last couple months.
Let me just say this. Sable's a better worker than Mark Marrow in this match.
That's not saying that much.
No, it's really not. But still, Mark Marrow been wrestling for years.
Yeah, he never learned how, though. At one point, Sable has Goldust pinned. The referee doesn't see it. Luna goes for a splash and hits Goldust. Sable hits a power bomb, but Luna kicks out. Sable then hits the TKO and gets the pin. Sable gets a reaction like Hulk Hogan in his prime.
Man, when she wins that match, like people are on their feet. Like it's not just, hey, that chick sure is hot with her big tits. Like they love her.
Yeah. They don't end up doing much of anything with her. Like really, when you look back on this run, they don't really have a women's division, which is obviously an issue. They've really only got Luna. They bring in Jackie and eventually they bring in Ivory, but they don't. They're not going to emphasize women's wrestling, which is a big mistake because this was one of their, like, you have Sable and China and somehow they never cross paths.
God, man. Sable versus China could have main evented a SummerSlam as big as they were at this point.
They just, yeah, I mean, and today now they're actually pushing women's wrestling and we'll see what becomes of Rousey, but they just don't have a Sable-like star right now.
No. But I mean, lo and behold, when you push it, the market is there. People want to pay to see it. It was always there. They just refuse to acknowledge it. And they are so lucky that they had Steve Austin and The Rock and all those top stars because this era is incredibly wasteful when it comes to talent. They had probably the most stacked roster of talent they had ever had, and it's just they're doing nothing with everyone.
Well, you can only push so many guys. You don't need new stars when you have Steve Austin and The Rock and The Undertaker and Triple H and Kane until they're all gone.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like, guys get over and nothing comes of it because they don't need them to be over.
So next, Tennessee Lee, who's Colonel Robert Parker, is in the ring to introduce Jeff Jarrett. How's that spelled?
JARR ha ha ETT ha ha. Oh wait, I missed the Jeff part, didn't I? Damn it!
Nobody cares. Hall of Famer Jeff Jarrett.
Hall of Famer Jeff Jarrett. God damn it!
They bring out Jennifer Flowers. Jarrett has sort of been repackaged. He's basically back to being a country singer after he was something else for a brief period of time. Can't really say what he was. He had kind of Aztec looking gear and a ponytail.
God, that was so weird.
Yeah. They brought him back in '97, had him do a shoot promo where he called out Steve Austin. Austin said, "No, I don't want to work with him." Sorry, Jeff Jarrett. The most he got was he got stunned by Austin, and then Austin did the Fargo strut on top of him.
What a terrific burial that was.
Got revenge for those shitty Memphis payoffs.
Let the record show that Jeff Jarrett was actually liked by the clique. He is basically the person who inherits the entire history of the NWA. He has so much going for him. Everybody wants him to succeed, and he just doesn't.
Nobody wants him to succeed because everybody hates his dad because he paid them like shit when they were in Memphis.
That's a good point.
He inherits his dad's heat with everyone.
I guess I should have said promoters want him to succeed so badly, and he's just never gonna.
Yeah, so the story I've heard is Austin's working in Memphis. He gets his week's check, and it's like $150 or something. And he's sitting there staring at in disbelief. And Jeff Jarrett walks by and goes, "Well, hey, son, I ain't going to get any bigger staring at it like that."
Oh, why would you do that?
And he didn't realize who he was pissing off.
Oh, and then
Steve Austin waited and waited, and he had his revenge.
God, that Fargo strut may have been the best moment of Steve Austin's career.
It's so great.
It's the pettiest thing.
Oh, man, Jeff Jarrett's had a weird career.
Yeah, he has. He has been a failure mid-carder in every major promotion.
This was a very strange appearance. He introduces Jennifer Flowers, and that's his role on the show.
Yep.
Didn't even get in the tag team battle royal.
I mean, do you think that Jeff Jarrett could have been a main eventer somewhere for real? Or did he just not have it?
Not a very good one. I mean, if you're WCW in 2000, he was a decent option because they didn't have anything. If you were TNA, he was your best option because you didn't have anything. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, now he's your Intercontinental Champion or a tag team guy.
Right.
He was a good worker who didn't really have a great look or physique and was just an okay promo. And I don't know what his best character was, but I never found him believable as a badass. The don't piss me off guy was just not believable. The country music singer gimmick was fun, and it was just a modern version of the honky tonk man. But that's not something that's going to be in your main event.
For the record, his best character was as the fake MMA guy in TNA when he was feuding with Kurt Angle, and he decided to be like ultra UFC guy, but he had no idea how to do any holds. That was his best character.
That was CM Punk's best character too.
Oh, hot take.
So Jennifer Flowers is the ring announcer for the Intercontinental Championship match in which The Rock defends against Ken Shamrock. The Rock is out with the Nation of Domination, as Jennifer Flowers announces it here. On the way into the show, The Rock hits Shamrock with one of the sickest chair shots I've ever seen.
It is disgusting. And Shamrock would take those. That's not the only one of those he took.
Rock in that chair, not cool.
I don't know if it's just that he was he took some vicious shots to the head too. Maybe that's just how his
he
philosophy.
was always smart enough to get his hands up, though.
Yeah, obviously the thing that he did to Mankind at the Royal Rumble is disgusting. Like, if he wasn't The Rock, like, we would bury other people for having done that. And, like, we just kind of brushed it off because it was him. Like, if Hardcore Holly had done that, we never would have forgotten it.
Yeah. So the stipulation here is that if Rock's disqualified, he loses the title. Shamrock comes out looking like $1 trillion billion bucks.
I know this is going to be like the 20th time we've said this.
God, he could have been so big.
It could have been so big, man. Shamrock could have made so much money.
Shamrock sprints to the ring and just beats the hell out of Rock. Rock tries to walk out. I guess that wouldn't cost him the title because if he's counted out, he doesn't lose the belt. But Shamrock runs him down. Rock takes over, hits the scoop slam in the first people's elbow in WrestleMania history.
Nice.
Ref gets bumped. Rock hits Shamrock with another despicable chair shot to the head, but Shamrock kicks out at 2. Shamrock turns it around, gets the ankle lock. Rock taps out. Shamrock wins the Intercontinental title. Crowd goes berserk.
Yep.
The Nation rushes the ring. Shamrock belly-to-belly suplexes all of them. Mark Henry gets a pop when he and Shamrock do their face-off.
I wonder, like, I don't remember anything during this time, like, getting Mark Henry particularly over. Maybe it was just that he was such a big dude for Shamrock to go up against.
Yeah, I think people were just anticipating seeing Shamrock throw him around, which he did. Shamrock reapplies the ankle lock. Farouk runs down to the ring, but then reconsiders and decides he's not going to help Rock.
Love it.
Shamrock refuses to break the hold. Eventually, it's announced that the referee has reversed his decision, disqualified Shamrock for refusing to obey his instructions, and that Rock is still the champion. This leads Shamrock to beat up all of the referees on the entire roster, and then chase Rock up the ramp and dump his stretcher and beat him up some more. What do you think of having Shamrock not win the belt here?
I kind of love the bait and switch like this. I know that not everybody loves it. It's kind of the Dusty finish, right? Where, like, you give them the good moment and then you immediately take it away. But I kind of like that idea. It just feeds so much into the idea that Shamrock is his own worst enemy. That, like, when he gets angry, like, it fucks everything up for him, but he just can't stop. And to have him basically take on the entire roster and win was amazing.
And just more heat on Rock because he retained the title again in the shittiest way possible.
Even though he got his ass beat, yes. And, like, the next night on Raw, like, Rock has so much more heat than he did the night before. Like, this works like a dream.
Yeah, I mean, the disappointment is just like they never have a long-term plan for Shamrock. And I just don't get how they didn't want to do Shamrock against Austin. I guess it was just that Shamrock wasn't a very good promo, but he didn't need to be.
I mean, I don't understand. When he joined the corporation, like, I know why they had to put The Rock in the corporation, because that's one of the great angles of all time. I totally get it. But, like, you couldn't have gotten a pay-per-view main event out of corporate Shamrock versus Austin, really? Like, you couldn't have really done something with that?
I never liked Shamrock turning heel and joining the corporation. I just didn't. He was so over as a face.
And it was so random. Like, it just happened out of nowhere. All right, let me ask you a serious question. If Shamrock shows up in 1995 instead of 1996, is he the top guy?
Oh, I just don't think Vince ever would have gone with him because the promos weren't there.
Yeah.
But I mean, man, he had a lot going for him. I mean, he has an incredible physique. He's a good worker. He's credible. He's got natural charisma.
The fans just buy it.
Yeah. I mean, he was hot from the moment he came in, and he gives them something totally different.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, if Vince is sitting there and his business is dying and he's only got Shawn and Brett and Kid walks in, like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, how would you compare and contrast him with Brock Lesnar?
He is better than Brock Lesnar. Okay, hold on. Let me not hot take this. Let me actually think about it. Brock is
Much bigger, like a
yes.
bigger physical. I mean, Shamrock has a fantastic body, but Brock is 6'5" or whatever and
Like
285 pounds.
Brock, especially when he first started, got kind of that like Andre the Giant reaction where when he came out, people were like, whoa,
Yeah.
look at that dude. That's crazy. And he's such a physical specimen that he has credibility like probably nobody ever has in wrestling other than maybe like Andre. Like you just believe, like you believe that Ken Shamrock could beat anybody, but you believe that Brock Lesnar should beat anybody, like just automatically. So he has that over Shamrock. He's a much worse talker than Shamrock is, but he's always had Heyman.
Yeah.
But he's much, much, much less charismatic than Shamrock is. Much, much less. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah. When Shamrock fires up and screams, the crowd just comes to life.
It's like a Hogan comeback. Like, he has that in him. That's babyface fire, man. That's what Japanese wrestling is predicated on.
Ooh. I mean, every time we do a show with him on, and I feel like we end up having this discussion. But man, it feels like he should have been a lot more than he was.
I would like to officially welcome Ken Shamrock as the third inductee into the Lawcast Hall of Fame, alongside Sid and the Warlord, for us gushing about him on multiple podcasts completely out of context.
What a Hall of Fame it is.
Yes, it is.
We then get the classic "Try Lace in My Boots" promo. I absolutely love this. If you don't remember this, it's like each of the bunch of their top stars talking about like their legitimate athletic backgrounds and all the injuries they've had in the ring. You know, Undertaker's the main narrator, and he's like, "I know what you're thinking. I'm not an athlete. I'm just a wrestler." And then Farouk talks about having his jersey retired at Florida State. Rock about winning the national championship at Miami. They're talking about I broke bones, I had this injury, all these things. I think this is awesome.
Yeah. This is so much better than like the don't try this at home thing while still getting across basically the same message. And I know it's to like basically fight back against the idea like, oh, this is fake, this is stupid, blah, blah, blah. They should still air this promo today. Like it's perfect. There's nothing about this I would change.
Yeah, I just like put these guys over as the legitimate, credible athletes they are.
I mean, they've even got like Michaels in there being like, I had 12 concussions. Like, fuck, that's a lot of concussions, Sean. Damn.
Yeah, not something they would brag about today.
Right.
Oh, next up, we have the dumpster fire match for the World Tag Team Championship.
And it is a dumpster fire.
As the New Age Outlaws defend against Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie.
Like, look, we like Terry Funk. Like, is that a general statement of fact? Like on this podcast, we like Terry Funk?
Yeah.
Okay. But Chainsaw Charlie is the shits, right?
Oh, yeah. Is he even Chainsaw Charlie here, though? He's not wearing the pantyhose on his head anymore.
I mean, he's still billed as Chainsaw Charlie.
Kind of. I mean, JR calls him Terry Funk throughout the match.
JR completely, like, despite the fact that Terry himself wants to be Chainsaw Charlie, JR does not put that over for 1 second.
JR is not playing along with that.
And much the same way that, like, Michael Cole would just refuse to call Mankind and would just keep calling him Mick Foley. Like, I don't know who was under orders to make him do that, but it felt weird. Like, all right, stop saying his real name.
So the backstory here is that on an episode of Raw in February, Funk and Cactus wrestled each other in a hardcore match. It was like, we respect each other, but we want to see who the real king of hardcore is. Cactus threw Funk into a dumpster on the ramp on the stage and then climbed up the Titantron and did an elbow drop, not all the way from the top, but kind of from the bottom part of it down into the dumpster. The Outlaws then came out, locked the dumpster, and pushed it off the stage. This is a very dangerous stunt they did here.
Yeah. There's really no way to fully kayfabe this stunt. It's not like they filled it full of packing peanuts. It's just Terry and Cactus in the dumpster, like holding on to the sides. Like you can easily get fucked up really bad this way.
I mean, you see a dumpster and how heavy it is, and you imagine it rolling out of control and how much damage that could do.
Absolutely.
Also, that it could have rolled into the crowd.
Yep. Absolutely could have.
So this becomes a very interesting segment because they end up basically stopping the show for about 15 minutes and really treat this like it's real, like it's a stunt that went wrong. Like the entire roster comes out to check on Cactus and Funk. Vince comes out.
Vince comes out in a capacity he had never shown himself in
Yeah.
before.
Like this is Vince is the owner of the company, and like guys are getting mad at the Outlaws and like having to be restrained from going after them. The Outlaws are acting really upset, like, you know, we didn't mean to do this. Kevin Kelly references Wrestlers Court on commentary.
Yeah.
Uh, JR is like, what are these guys just desperate to get over? What are they doing here? Um,
Like it must be said, it feels very, very, very real in like a scary way.
yeah, I mean, rewatching it, I really enjoyed it just because it was so different. I'm not sure it was a good ratings idea because the show just kind of ground to a halt for about 15 minutes, and I can imagine myself, flipping over to Nitro while that was going on.
Well, the whole
Although
thing,
this may have been like on a Saturday night because they had some Raws that were not on Monday in the lead up to this, so it may not have been head to head with Nitro.
I have a question. When DX reforms the day after this WrestleMania, were they supposed to be heels?
Yeah. Yeah, they were in it because they were heels for like the first month. Triple H was still feuding with ON. The Outlaws were still feuding with LOD. They
Okay,
just ended up turning them face either because they had no one to feud with or just because the crowd was starting to cheer them.
got it. Okay, because like the problem with that angle is it's supposed to put so much heat on the Outlaws, and it really doesn't. Because like the Outlaws are still kind of getting pops in this match.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's just the entrance is so good. Like, and Road Dogg is so charismatic. You can't not like him.
right. So I mean, like it's a long way to go to like get some heat, and I think it would have worked in other circumstances, but it was already too far gone here. Like the Outlaws were going babyface. That was just gonna happen.
Yeah. So the other thing that happened on that show is, they do an interview where the Outlaws are like backstage, and Jr. is asking them, what are you guys desperate to get over? What were you thinking doing that? And like they're upset, and then Shawn and Triple H show up, and they're like, no, don't you apologize? We're in a ratings war. They're forcing us to do everything. They're forcing us to push the boundaries because they want to make money again, like kind of laying the seeds for an interesting storyline that doesn't end up going anywhere.
Well, let's also speculate wildly on this. Do you think that X Pac and the Outlaws were going to join DX with Shawn Michaels in it?
Yeah, I mean, because they were putting like all throughout this, they're putting the Outlaws with DX. Like they team up at No Way Out. The Outlaws are like helping DX at a bunch of different turns. Like, yeah, they were building towards that.
And I mean, it makes sense. The Outlaws are just kind of on the same wavelength as DX. Those two acts are kind of what the Attitude Era was, with like Austin added in.
Yeah, and you put X Pac in there because he's a click guy, and that's a really strong stable for Shawn to be running with after WrestleMania.
I
But
wish I could have seen it with Sean because like seeing those guys involved in the main event instead of just being in the mid card would have been special.
so in this match, you win by putting both of your opponents in the dumpster at ringside and locking the dumpster shut. Is this your favorite dumpster match?
Gosh, it's got to be a top five at least.
Yeah. Were there any other dumpster? There was a dumpster match at King of the Ring. It's the only
I
other one I remember.
I kind of wish that this had been like somebody's like favorite match or like somebody's like special go-to gimmick match, like Repo Man or somebody like that. Like, let's do the dumpster match.
This match, a lot of dumb stuff happens here.
Yep.
Cactus misses that front flip thing he does off the apron and just smashes into the side of the dumpster. The Outlaws backdrop Funk into the dumpster. JR says there's more finesse in Muskogee on payday weekend than there is in this match.
That is a hell of a reference.
Yeah. Cactus does the Cactus Jack elbow drop off the apron with a cookie sheet. Cactus and Funk set up a ladder. Cactus climbs it. Billy Gunn climbs it. And then the ladder gets knocked over into the dumpster. You can see Cactus hits his shin on the dumpster as he's going down. I think everybody was hurt coming out of this match.
Here's the thing. It's a steel fucking dumpster. It's like, it's not gimmicked. Like, what the hell are you guys doing?
Let's also recall Shawn Michaels suffered a career-ending back injury a month and a half before this, hitting the side of a casket, which is not nearly as bad as hitting a dumpster.
Like, somebody could have been paralyzed in this match. That's just true.
The Outlaws double powerbomb Funk from the apron into the dumpster. Then the Outlaws and Cactus fight their way backstage. Funk shows up. He gets behind the wheel of a forklift, and then he uses the forklift to dump the Outlaws into a dumpster and lock it shut to win the match. It's around this point that we see the back of Funk's shirt get pulled up, and we see his body has become one gigantic bruise.
It's disgusting.
Bright red.
Like, I've never seen a bruise like this in my life. It's like his whole back.
Yeah. I don't even know when it happened. Probably when he took the powerbomb or the backdrop.
I would say.
So this decision is subsequently overturned because they were supposed to put them into the ringside dumpster. They instead put them into a dumpster backstage. So the titles are held up, and the next night they have a steel cage match in which the Outlaws win the belts back after interference from Triple H and Chyna and X-Pac on their behalf.
Yeah, that match goes down in history only because it was the formation of the new DX.
Yeah, the Raw from the night after this WrestleMania, I think, is one of the best ever.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, with Austin stunning McMahon and getting arrested, X-Pac returning to the company and the formation of the new DX, the Nation turning on Farouk. They just set up all sorts of hot things for coming out of WrestleMania.
Definitely.
And then 2 weeks after that is the one where they tease the Austin McMahon match and they beat Nitro in the ratings for the first time in a year and a half.
That's another great, great show if you've never seen it.
Yeah. I mean, just this is when they're just catching fire at this point.
Yep.
Okay. We've got our sub-main event. It's The Undertaker against Kane. I don't really feel like explaining this storyline here. I think everybody gets it. It was very.
They wrote a book, guys. Go read it.
Yeah, we've talked about it. I mean, so what's happened since the Rumble? At the Rumble, Taker was locked in the casket. Kane chopped it with an axe and set it on fire. Undertaker was gone for a while, and then he was resurrected with a bolt of lightning. Proceeded to cut a promo, promising to strike down upon Kane with great vengeance and furious anger, explaining he had gone to the dark side to, convene with his parents and explain to them why he was going to fight Kane and challenge Kane to the match at WrestleMania.
This storyline is insane. From start to finish. But it's the good kind of insane, where like it makes you curious as to what's going to happen next. And God, I wonder what the mystery is and what's going on with Kane, and can he actually talk? And like eventually it'll get to the point where Kane and The Undertaker are so synonymous with each other that just by being in the ring together, like the fans are like full Hogan popping every time.
So I do want to touch on the idea that the rumor that Papa Shango was going to be part of this storyline.
Yeah.
That just made so much sense to me because when Paul Bear was first teasing this, one of his cryptic things was there were 3 graves, and the idea was that like Papa Shango had resurrected the Undertaker. I think this was just like a false piece of reporting, but they had re-signed Charles Wright at the time, but he just ended up being part of the Nation.
I mean, it's one of those things that makes sense. They probably never actually intended to do that. But I mean, all those things come together and you're just like, hey, that would explain. Because The Undertaker, I mean, we all understand that he's a zombie, right? Like he's the dead man. Like we all understand that, right? Like, so who makes zombies? It makes sense.
Yeah. So, it's a crazy storyline, but one of the few times they wrote out like a year-long story arc here and actually executed it properly.
And it works. Kane gets so over from all of this because they make him look like a killer.
Yeah. I was so into this feud as a kid. Like, I was more into this than I was Austin at this point.
God, yes. Like, it was just cool. There was nothing on TV like this at all.
Yeah, it's just like a live action comic book.
Yeah.
So they introduce Pete Rose as the guest ring announcer. He proceeds to cut a tremendous heel promo on the Red Sox.
His line about Bill Buckner, I still laugh about to this day.
Yeah, he says he left some tickets at will call for Bill Buckner, but he couldn't bend over to pick them up, and the crowd is so pissed off.
Oh my God, it's so good. Pete Rose. Who would have thought that Pete Rose, who came in to do like one guest appearance, would wind up have like a 3-year role as like the greatest heel of all time?
This is the funny thing is, yeah, he gets a ton of heat, and then Kane comes out and tombstones him, turning himself babyface.
Yes, that was the thing. Every time Kane ever interacted with Pete Rose, he was a heel. Like, what are you doing?
I love the fact that they proceed to feud for the next couple years. Like, Pete Rose attacks him with a baseball bat. Pete Rose dressed as the San Diego Chicken. Like,
the callback at Royal Rumble 2001. Was that hit? Was that?
No, that was Drew Carey.
Oh, no, never mind. You're right. Never mind.
So Undertaker gets a classic entrance. There's thunder and lightning. They play O Fortuna. There's druids with torches. He comes out in like a weird leathery getup. The thing with the really tall collar behind his head.
The ridiculously tall collar, yes.
And then they have to have a match.
Yeah. Undertaker is kind of going through the same thing as Triple H during this era, but instead of every look he comes up with being lame, every look he comes up with is super awesome. Like, he can't do any wrong at this point. His theme changes like 8 times. His attire keeps changing. He still looks cool.
I think this is one of maybe the best match these guys ever had, but that's not saying a whole lot because their matches pretty much always sucked.
Yeah, here's the thing, is that Kane trained himself to be the Undertaker. Like, that's how he learned how to play his character. He does the Undertaker spots. He is the Undertaker. The Undertaker can't wrestle the Undertaker. That doesn't make any sense.
They tried that. It sucked.
Yeah. It's just, it doesn't work. Like, there's nobody to take the bumps. What's supposed to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's just 2 guys punching and goozling each other is all these matches come down to.
I will say I prefer the Inferno match just because the fire gives it a little added drama.
I mean, especially the spot where Taker does the dive over the flames and they shoot up.
That's the best spot of Taker's career. Like, that's the coolest thing he ever did.
So, I mean, the early part of the match is just Kane dominating. I mean, they're putting over that nobody has ever physically dominated The Undertaker like this.
Which is not true because they only ever booked him against people who could do that. But we're ignoring that now.
A couple minutes in, Taker knocks him to the floor, Goes for the plancha and he misses and just crashes and burns through the announce table. Do you think this was supposed to happen?
I mean, it has to have been, right? Because Undertaker goes for it.
Oh, this
Like,
is such a rough bump.
but like, think about the athleticism involved in this because he flies over the top rope. Like, this is akin to when Benoit does his suicide dive and goes 15 feet and hits the announce table. Like, he's going for that table.
Having a 300-pound guy do that is nuts. Like,
Yeah.
we kind of just got used to it. He should not be able to do that. It's
No.
physically impossible.
Like, I've seen other people do it, especially like I've seen Bobby Lashley like do something similar, though his looks like shit. Like, it's something people can do, but he makes it look so good.
Bobby Lashley's way smaller than The Undertaker.
Way smaller,
He's
yes.
a big guy, but The Undertaker here probably pushing 320 pounds, I would guess.
And I would
He's
say
got a big gut here.
And even worse is the height because he has so much leg to get over the rope.
Yeah.
And he just nails it every time.
Oh, he started almost dying on it later in his career, and he finally stopped doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a rough bump. He makes it back into the ring. Taker recovers, sets up the tombstone. Kane counters it and hits his own tombstone. Taker kicks out at 2. 10 seconds later, Taker is back up on his feet, chokeslams Kane, tombstones Kane, and Kane kicks out, and the crowd is stunned.
As much as people have kicked out of the tombstone at this point, nobody really did then.
I don't think it had ever been kicked out of to this point. I could be wrong, but I don't think like this. That wasn't a thing they did back then.
Yeah, especially like the hands on the chest, tongue out, like the whole deal.
Yeah. Undertaker hits a second tombstone. Kane kicks out again. Paul Bearer, this entire match on the floor, is hilarious. Damn you, Undertaker! Damn you to hell!
Is that what his actual speaking voice sounds like?
His accent's not that heavy. He was doing like a Southern preacher deal here.
Because, man, it must be exhausting on your voice to have to keep that level of high-pitched screaming up all the time.
I've seen a shoot interview with him, and he's like much more soft-spoken than this.
Right.
Yeah. The fact that we may have talked about this, but the fact that he's doing the Southern preacher gimmick kind of makes me wonder if they thought about using Brother Love for this.
Gosh.
Did we make that up, or am I remembering something from Something to Wrestle With?
For this particular match?
No, not just for this, but like in general to have Brother Love be the manager for Kane.
Now that you mention it, I do feel like that
sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do think that may have been kicked around for sure. And it would have made a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Like, he was the original manager of The Undertaker.
Yeah. And then you have him and Paul Bearer as them. Although I guess at this point, Paul Bearer was not managing The Undertaker anymore.
Right.
You also could have had, I don't think it would have worked to have Undertaker bring back Brother Love to be his manager, not in this era.
Resurrect him.
Undertaker hits a clothesline off the top rope. Kane sits up. A third tombstone finally gets the win for Taker. Kane still kicks out right after the pin.
This has nothing to do with that, but you just planted this in my head. What if Bruce Pritchard had been the higher power?
I'm sure that was kicked around too.
God, I hope it was kicked very, very far away.
Because Ted DiBiase was one of the rumors, and like the basis for it was basically that like he brought the Undertaker in at Survivor Series. Look, on the other hand, like at that point, Ted DiBiase had become like a born again Christian, and I actually think he would have nailed that character
for sure. Oh God! Every time we bring this up, though, it just drives me crazy that it was supposed to be Christopher Daniels, fallen angel Christopher Daniels as actual Satan.
That would have been so weird.
Just introduce someone no one's ever seen before as Satan.
Yeah.
Dude.
I just, it was never going to happen because he's way too tiny.
Right.
Like, especially in that era. Like, that was not going to happen. Vince was not going to do that.
But like, what if it had, man? God. Uh,
Kane recovers to Tombstone Undertaker. He walks out to booze. Did Taker have to win here?
um,
Would have strangled the streak in the crib. So it's good that he did.
but I mean, at this point, they're not even thinking about the
No,
streak.
the streak
Like,
doesn't exist yet.
they fully said that they don't even think about it till like what, 17?
Yeah, I think 17's the first. I mean, the first real acknowledgement I remember is after he beat Flair and he flashed 8 fingers leaving the ring.
Right.
But yeah, I think they may have mentioned it at WrestleMania 17.
But
But yeah,
yeah,
they didn't realize it yet.
I guess he has to win, but it doesn't.
If Kane wins, Kane is made.
Yes.
But does it bury the Undertaker too much to lose here?
I don't know if it's possible to bury the Undertaker,
No, I
really.
don't think it is.
Especially since this is a storyline that isn't even close to over. I probably would have had Kane win here.
Yeah, because you're a slimy shit heel.
Yeah, pretty much.
Book more heat.
Book more heat.
Yeah, I
Heat,
mean,
heat, heat.
the other thing is the one hole I'll really point to in the booking here is they do not set up a challenger for Steve Austin.
Nope.
Like there's no one to challenge him, and they end up pulling Mick Foley out of their ass. So Kane winning would have set him up as the natural challenger to Austin, but it probably would have been too soon to go to that for Unforgiven.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, part of the issue is just, Shawn is supposed to be able to do a rematch, but he can't because he's too hurt.
Right.
He could have done Triple H, but I don't think that would have drawn very well.
No. It was supposed to be Shawn for like another couple months, then segue into the corporation, then segue into Rock. Like that's how it should have panned out.
Okay, it's main event time. Mike Tyson out first, played out by the DX band. Then they go back to the tracking shot entrance from Survivor Series that we loved.
God, I
First,
love it.
yeah, we see Steve Austin storming through the back to the ring, all the intensity in the world.
See, that's the thing about Steve Austin that I've never seen anyone else in wrestling history ever have. Like that, and maybe that is just the difference, is that he just radiated the sense that he was just powered by rage,
Yeah.
Like he just, even when he's just walking down a hallway, it's just like barely suppressed anger all the time.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing they would do this a lot on Raw in this era is they would just show Austin in the back, like having a cup of coffee, walking through the hallway, and it was just like you knew something was happening. Like you had to stick around to see what he was going to do.
He's just the kind of guy who, when he walks into a room, you're just like, oh shit, what's that guy gonna do? Like he just had that vibe to him all the time.
Gigantic pop for Austin, blows the roof off.
Yep.
Crowd has been quiet for a lot of the show, but they're here for this. I mean, this is what they came to see.
Absolutely.
Then Michaels, China, and Helmsley come through the backstage area. Helmsley flips off the camera. Then Michaels turns the camera, says, "This one's for you, Earl." He's shouting out Earl Hebner, who was in the hospital after a heart attack.
Though fans wouldn't necessarily have known that. So if you're a guy who's sitting at home who knew about the screw job, that might
Yeah.
just seem like some heat.
Everything Shawn Michaels does. Is Shawn Michaels just someone with very poor social skills who's misunderstood?
I had to say, if we find out someday that he's just like on the spectrum and like he just couldn't get it right, even though he was trying to be nice to everyone, I would I would understand.
Reading his book, he more or less acknowledges he was just kind of an emotionally stunted man-child.
Yeah, I mean
He just
that's
somehow just didn't know how to interact with people other than his clique buddies.
that's what's on TV, so I believe it.
So, main event for the WWF Championship, Shawn Michaels defends against Steve Austin. Um, this is not a great match. They had a much better match at King of the Ring 97. They're hugely limited by injuries. I mean, not only does Michaels obviously have his back problem, but Austin is dealing with his neck issues and, you know, is a much better wrestler before the neck injury and then after his neck surgery. This is, in these couple of years, he is nowhere near his physical peak.
And with that said, the amount of stuff that they actually try to do is pretty incredible. Because they could have just done 9 minutes and gone home, you know?
Yeah.
But like they're doing some shit.
Sean is still like bumping on punches. Like it's crazy.
He's taken like full layout bumps on everything. And like he has a ridiculously bad back. And like you can see him wincing and like having trouble walking. And but he's still like bumping over the ring, bumping off the turnbuckle, flying outside.
Yeah. So Sean gets his pants yanked down early in the match, and then Austin like keeps kicking his legs out from under him, so he takes 3 or 4 back bumps in a row, and then he gets backdropped over the top rope onto Triple H.
Like, and I think I mentioned this once before in passing, but I think this is the match, like doing the match and doing it in this way kind of saved Shawn Michaels because his reputation at that time was about as bad as anybody's has ever been, right? He doesn't do jobs. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't fight through injuries. He doesn't care. And here he goes out where everybody knows he's completely hurt, and he puts on an incredibly gutsy performance.
I think that's why he did it. He was determined to not let his legacy be that he was the guy who pulled out of the WrestleMania main event 2 years in a row.
Right.
Even though this was obviously a very legitimate injury, he was not going to be that guy who did that again.
Absolutely.
So he guts through this match. You can just see he's in complete agony. He takes that bump in the corner where he does a flip and like folds up. What is he thinking?
He's just gonna do everything that he normally does. Like,
Yeah, like they can just have a punch kick match here. It would be okay. And they do a lot of that.
I also
But
don't really know if Shawn Michaels knows how to have a punch kick match, honestly.
yeah, yeah, fair point. Austin scores with a hot shot. He sets up for the stunner, but Michaels slips out. Um, I should mention earlier, Triple H attacked Austin and was ejected by the referee. Smart to get him and China out of there. You didn't boil it down to just Tyson and Austin and Michaels.
Right.
They brawl on the outside. They go back inside. Michaels hits Austin with a snapmare, and you can see him just wince in pain.
Yep.
Just the most basic moves at this point are killing him. Michaels works over Austin's knee. Austin goes to the floor. Tyson throws him back in, which is like the first and one of the only things Tyson does in this match.
I had to say, I do wonder if they had him backstage where they're laying it out and they're just like, look, Mike, we're both too fucked up to carry you through anything, so you're just going to sit outside until the end.
Yeah, like after all of this build and hype, he really has almost no involvement in the entire match.
Yep.
Michaels gets Austin the figure 4, but Austin manages to turn it over. Michaels then locks on a sleeper hold. Austin escapes by sandwiching the referee in the corner. Michaels sets up for sweet chin music. Austin ducks it. Austin goes for the stunner. Michaels shoves him off. Austin comes off the ropes. Michaels goes for sweet chin music again. Austin catches his leg, spins him around, nails him with the stunner. Michaels slides in, makes a fast 1, 2, 3, and Austin wins the title. The Austin era has begun.
And like JR is really good on the call here because JR's freaking out. And I don't think that they had established on camera that like they're actual real life friends at this point, right?
No, because I think Austin had stunned him at some
Right.
point in the fall. So yeah, they really hadn't.
But like JR is just like being like the voice of the fans and just being like, the Austin era has begun on a great day. Like, and it's awesome. Like, it feels like a genuinely important moment.
Yeah, puts this over as the changing of the guard that it is. Um, Tyson or Shawn gets in Tyson's face. Tyson knocks him out. And then him and Austin celebrate together. And I guess they were together all along, and this was all an elaborate ruse.
Yeah, that's the impression. Like, I would have really appreciated if they had sowed some seeds of dissent between Tyson and DX or something like that, just to like make it unsure what whose side he's on. Because the way that it seems is literally just that like Austin played DX, but why would Tyson be in on that?
Because he cold stones his man, I guess.
Cold Stone's my man.
Yeah, I mean, it's, they don't really ever explain it, but they wanted the twist for the match. Like, it makes sense for this to end with Tyson and Austin being cool with each other because, yeah, I don't know, does it? It's surprising that they never came back with Tyson again. Like, that
Let me ask you this. If Michaels can work, is Backlash Austin and Tyson versus Shawn and Triple H?
oh, maybe. The thing is, I don't think they wanted to use Tyson again because he's just too damn expensive. And
Right.
like, he gets his boxing license back not long after this, and there's so much more money in boxing than there is in wrestling. Like,
But if they were going to get a match out of him, that seems like the one.
yeah, or I mean, maybe you do eventually get to him in Austin, but yeah, they never, I mean, they don't use him again until he like hosted a Raw in 2009 or 2010. And I think he had a match on that show, actually.
He did. He had an actual kind of match. Because he said on it, like, it's always been my dream to have a wrestling match. And I remember watching it being like, well, why didn't you then?
That's what's funny is, his boxing career doesn't last that much longer after this. I think he's done in like 2002 or 2003. I think there still was enough equity in him that they could have brought him in and done some business with him after that.
Absolutely.
Especially as their business was softening, they could have used that boost.
Even towards the end of his boxing career, I think he and Lennox Lewis drew like a shitload.
Yeah, he was still enough of an attraction. And like, you had a bunch of really weird stuff happen. Him saying he was going to eat Lennox Lewis's children, getting a face tattoo. Yeah, like there was still enough Mike Tyson craziness that like they could have made some money with him.
For sure.
But instead, we didn't see him again for 10 years after this. So that is the end for WrestleMania 14. Not a bad show, but not a great one. I would not put this in the top tier of WrestleManias.
Yeah. The only really interesting thing about this WrestleMania to me is back when we were doing like all the shows for Q Reviews, our very first classic review and my wife Danielle's very first review with us was this show. And she still to this day holds it in her heart as her least favorite wrestling show of all time. And she almost stopped watching wrestling entirely because I made her watch it. She hated this show.
Wrong show to start with, I guess.
Oh God, yes it is. And you got to think like out of context, if you don't know who any of these people are, this is not a great introduction to wrestling.
Well, that is true, but I think the shows do have to be watched in the context of the time. Nobody left this arena disappointed on this night.
That's for sure true. And
nobody
you
who
said,
bought this show felt like they didn't get their money's worth.
and like you said, like this was popped by Austin and Tyson, but what people saw, they wanted to keep watching. Like they kept these people, basically all of them who tuned in to see it, continued right on.
Ooh. So that ends our WrestleMania journey for this year. 10 WrestleManias we knocked out.
Man. And I guess the question that I brought up repeatedly throughout the course of the process was to this point, and so we're now basically at WrestleMania 9, even though we knocked out 14 also, is what is the best match in WrestleMania history to this point? And as far as I'm concerned, it's still Ultimate Warrior versus Randy Savage. What say you?
That's what I was gonna say. I think that's probably it so far.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see because match quality is going to get a hell of a lot better in the next ones.
Yeah, I think that might be topped by the two matches at WrestleMania 10.
I can't wait to find out.
But that wraps us for the WrestleMania journey. After all this Yankee New York wrestling, I feel like we got to go south of the Mason-Dixon line next week.
Oh God, you were just chomping at the bit to get back down there, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, it's time. And on the 30th anniversary, I think it's only fitting that we cover the first Clash of the Champions.
Clash of the Champions.
It's the show that was way, way better than WrestleMania 4 and free to boot.
I can't wait to talk about like the launching of Sting as a person from mid-card shithead to made man in one night.
Yeah, the night Sting became a star and an interesting undercard from an interesting and chaotic time for Jim Crockett Promotions.
Absolutely. Tons to talk about.
Ooh, so thanks for staying with us on this WrestleMania journey. We will see you again next week.